The supermarket banana is a rescue crop, and the disaster it escaped has come back. Its history starts with hard seeds, runs through corporate plantations, and ends with a fungus exploiting the weakness hidden inside a perfect yellow fruit. That fruit is usually a Cavendish banana. To most shoppers, it is simply what a banana looks like: curved, bright yellow when ripe, soft inside, and nearly identical from one store to the next. Before the 1950s, though, the export trade depended on a different banana called Gros Michel. A soil-borne disease devastated the plantations that grew it, and the industry gradually rebuilt around Cavendish plants, which could survive the strain responsible. Now, a related form of the pathogen can infect Cavendish. Why does this keep happening? The answer involves three connected questions. How did farmers turn a wild fruit packed with hard seeds into something edible? Why did corporations reproduce a few nearly identical plants across entire regions? And how did the consistency that made bananas cheap and global leave them dangerously easy for one specialized fungus to attack? The story starts thousands of years before refrigerated ships, branded fruit, or supermarket produce sections, in the humid forests of New Guinea and Southeast Asia. A wild banana does not look much like a convenient snack. Cut one open and much of what you find is seed. Large, dark, hard structures crowded into a relatively thin layer of pulp. You can recognize it as a banana, but eating one feels less like biting into dessert and more like working around a collection of pebbles. Two major contributors to cultivated bananas are wild species called Musa acuminata and Musa balbisiana. That does not mean every edible banana came from one straightforward pairing of those two plants. Banana domestication involved multiple wild populations, repeated hybridization, and a long history of people selecting and moving plants. Its family tree looks more like a network than a single clean trunk. The changes that mattered began as biological accidents. Some banana plants developed fruit without successful seed formation, a trait called parthenocarpy. Put simply, the plant could grow fleshy fruit even though normal fertilization had not produced mature seeds. Other changes involved hybridization and extra sets of chromosomes. Plants with more than 2 chromosome sets are called polyploids, and in cultivated bananas, those changes often contributed to sterility. Sterility sounds like the end of the line. For a farmer who had found a plant with softer, more edible fruit, it was an opportunity, with one condition. The plant could not reproduce reliably through seed. But banana plants also send up shoots from underground stems. Those shoots, usually called suckers, can be separated and replanted. Each sucker grows into a plant genetically very close to its parent. So when an early cultivator found an unusual banana with fewer hard seeds, more pulp, or a useful cooking quality, it did not have to disappear when the original plant died. Its shoots could be kept alive, and then the shoots from those shoots. The banana became edible through repetition. There was no single inventor and no dramatic act of redesign. Generations of farmers noticed useful plants, protected them, transplanted their suckers, and brought them into cultivated spaces. Natural mutation supplied the variation. Human selection decided which accidents endured. Evidence from Cook Swamp in the highlands of Papua New Guinea shows people managing landscapes and cultivating bananas by approximately the 5th millennium before the Common Era. Researchers have found microscopic silica bodies produced by plants, called phytoliths, along with archaeological evidence of drainage and cultivation. The site strongly supports very early banana management, though it does not establish one exact date or location for the first domestication. The process may have happened in several places, with repeated contact between wild and cultivated populations. Cook Swamp still makes the basic relationship clear. People were doing more than gathering whatever the forest provided. They altered the landscape, preserved favored plants, and built a crop that increasingly depended on them for survival. You can see that dependence in every seedless banana. Its pleasant interior is evidence of a reproductive problem. The fruit is easy for us to eat partly because the plant now struggles to reproduce by itself. But cloning did not immediately reduce the banana world to one variety. It allowed farmers to preserve many. Across New Guinea, island Southeast Asia, and neighboring regions, communities cultivated bananas with different textures, colors, tastes, and uses. Some were sweet enough to eat when ripe. Others contained more starch and were roasted, boiled, steamed, or cooked in other ways. The everyday distinction between a banana and a plantain can be useful in a market or kitchen, but botanically, the line is not exact. Many cultivated varieties fall somewhere along a range of sweetness, starchiness, texture, and preparation. The plants provided more than fruit. Their leaves could wrap food, cover surfaces, and meet other household needs. People could work the fibers into useful materials. Different varieties tolerated different soils, elevations, rainfall patterns, and local pests. A community that preserved several kinds of banana was not building a collection of novelty fruit. It was maintaining a practical agricultural library. Clonal propagation made that possible. If one plant produced fruit suited to cooking and another ripened sweet, farmers could copy them both. If a third grew well in one particular valley, its suckers could remain there. Genetic copying preserved valuable traits. The number of different plants being copied preserved diversity. That is an important distinction. Cloning does not automatically mean monoculture. A landscape containing many cloned cultivars can still be diverse. The later export system became vulnerable because corporations did something much narrower. They planted the same commercially useful type across vast, connected areas. Long before that industrial narrowing, banana plants traveled with people. Cultivated forms moved east into the Pacific and west through island Southeast Asia toward South Asia. Every relocation opened new possibilities for hybridization, local selection, and cultural use.
Because edible bananas were often sterile, migrants could not carry a handful of seed and expect the desired fruit to appear. They had to transport living planting material. A sucker is heavier and more fragile than a seed. It can carry pests and disease. It has to survive the journey, then take root in a suitable climate. But it comes with one powerful guarantee. If it lives, the new plant should retain the qualities that made the original worth carrying. This was how a dependent crop became mobile. People moved it because it was useful. The banana followed human roots because it could no longer rely on seeds to travel on its own. Its westward journey is complicated. Bananas became established in South Asia and moved through Indian Ocean networks into parts of Eastern Africa. Archaeological, linguistic, and genetic evidence all help reconstruct that movement, but some dates and routes remain disputed. Claims placing bananas in specific African settings at extremely early dates have prompted substantial debate. The evidence for ancient movement across the Indian Ocean is stronger than the evidence for one simple timetable. What we do know is that Africans cultivated bananas long before the modern export industry. African farmers incorporated them into established food systems, selected local forms, and developed important cooking traditions. In parts of the Great Lakes region, bananas became major staples. This was not an opening act before corporations arrived and made the crop important. Diverse bananas already supported communities and cuisines on their own terms. Islamic trade and agricultural exchange helped carry banana plants through parts of Eastern Africa, the Middle East, and the Mediterranean world. Medieval writers described the fruit, and people cultivated it in warm regions where climate and irrigation permitted. Europeans did not encounter an unknown plant and introduce it to global history. They met a crop whose human geography was already extensive. Portuguese expansion brought banana cultivation to Atlantic island colonies, including Madeira and the Canary Islands. From there, planting material crossed toward the Americas. One frequently repeated account credits a 16th-century transfer from the Canary Islands to Hispaniola. The broader Atlantic movement is well established, even if tidy stories about individual first arrivals are often neater than the surviving records. The word banana
probably entered major European languages through contact with West African languages, although its exact linguistic root is still unresolved. The uncertainty fits the fruit. Its name, genomes, and cultivation history all preserve evidence of movement between cultures, not ownership by any one nation. By the early modern period, banana plants had crossed oceans.
Trading the fruit itself over long distances was another matter. A banana continues breathing after harvest. It consumes stored energy, releases heat, softens, changes color, and both produces and responds to ethylene, a plant hormone involved in ripening. Pick it too late, and a warm ship's hold can reduce a valuable cargo to bruised pulp. Pick it mature but green, and there may be enough time to transport it before ripening accelerates. For centuries, that biological clock kept most bananas fairly close to the places where they grew. Plants could migrate slowly and establish new groves, but ripe fruit could not wait months for a distant buyer. The banana had become global as a crop without becoming global as a fresh commodity. During the 19th century, steamships, growing ports, rail connections, and rapidly expanding North American cities began to change the calculation. Distance was still there. A sufficiently coordinated business might now outrun it. One person associated with that transition was Lorenzo Dow Baker, an American sea captain. In the early 1870s, Baker carried green bananas from Jamaica to the United States and sold them at a profit. Later accounts sometimes polish these early voyages into tidy founding legends. The important mechanism does not require one perfect anecdote. Merchants had discovered that mature green bananas could complete much of their ripening after the journey. That gave them time. Not a lot, but enough. Harvesting green did not fix every problem. Heat could speed up ripening. Rough handling could bruise the fruit. Delays could ruin an entire shipment. An irregular vessel might deliver too many bananas one week and none the next. A profitable cargo showed that a market existed. It did not create a dependable supply. Baker's work eventually connected with Andrew Preston, a businessman who helped organize the Boston Fruit Company in the 1880s. The company coordinated Caribbean production with shipping and distribution in American cities. Its real innovation was not some magical banana that refused to spoil. It was a timetable that kept the fruit recognizable long enough to sell it. Plantations had to cut bunches at the correct stage. Laborers had to move them without too much damage. Ships had to leave on time. Ports had to unload quickly. Railways and urban distributors had to carry the fruit onward. Then ripening had to be managed near the market, so retailers received yellow bananas instead of hard green cargo or collapsing brown inventory. The profit margin sat inside that sequence. Miss the timetable, and the merchandise began turning itself into waste. Baker and Preston did not invent banana cultivation, Caribbean commerce, steam transport, or urban fruit distribution. Growers, laborers, dock workers, railway crews, merchants, and existing regional markets made the trade possible. Companies such as Boston Fruit did, however, combine those parts into a repeatable system. Occasional cargoes became scheduled commerce. Reliable schedules created dependable demand, and dependable demand fed a much larger appetite. Meeting it required more plantations, more transport, and tighter control over every stage between a tropical field and a northern city. In Costa Rica, miner Cooper Keith became another central figure. Keith took part in building a railway intended to connect the country's interior with the Caribbean coast. The project was punishingly difficult and financially dangerous. Growing bananas along the route helped provide freight and revenue. Railway and plantation did not remain separate businesses for long. Each made the other more valuable. In 1899, Keith's banana and transportation interests merged with the Boston Fruit Company to form the United Fruit Company. Other firms, including Standard Fruit, also became major forces. Competition differed by country and period, so this was never simply one corporation controlling every banana everywhere. Still, the largest firms built systems with extraordinary reach. They accumulated or controlled plantations. They developed rail spurs and port facilities. They ran steamships and communication networks. At the importing end, bananas moved through terminals, railways, wholesalers, ripening rooms, and retailers. Advertising taught consumers to see a tropical fruit as an ordinary household purchase. The export variety best suited to much of that system was Gros Michel, often called Big Mike in English. Its fruit traveled well by the standards of the period. It produced large bunches, had a relatively thick peel, and delivered the consistency that shippers and consumers wanted. A plantation filled with clonally propagated Gros Michel plants produced fruit with predictable characteristics. Workers could pack, transport, ripen, display, and promote the same variety using standardized procedures. Uniformity reduced commercial uncertainty. Harvests were easier to plan. Handling became more consistent. Customers learned exactly how the product should look and taste. Bananas became cheap and widely available far from the tropics. But that cheapness was not natural. It was assembled from land, labor, railways, ships, fuel, credit, political agreements, and strict control over time. The cheerful fruit on the table concealed something much closer to a transportation empire. That empire had grave consequences. Banana corporations acquired extensive land and exerted political influence in parts of Central America and the Caribbean. Governments sometimes shaped policy around company infrastructure, revenue, and foreign pressure. Laborers endured dangerous conditions, low wages, racial hierarchies, and violent repression. The term banana republic came out of this world of export dependence and foreign corporate power. The phrase reduced complicated countries to a dismissive label, but the system behind it was real. Economies organized around one narrow commodity, infrastructure controlled for private trade, and political institutions vulnerable to pressure from companies and foreign governments. In Colombia in 1928, soldiers killed workers during a strike against the United Fruit Company. The exact death toll remains disputed, with estimates varying widely, but the massacre itself is documented. In Guatemala, United Fruit's landholdings and lobbying formed part of the political context around the United States-backed overthrow of President Jacobo Arbenz in 1954. The coup involved multiple actors and motives. The company's interests and influence still cannot be separated from that history. Through all of this, the banana remained the governing object. Its perishability rewarded control over transportation. Control over transportation made control of land more valuable. Vast plantations favored one export variety that behaved predictably. Commercial uniformity and political power grew side by side. Meanwhile, beneath the soil, another consequence was developing. Reports of a destructive banana wilt appeared in Central America around the turn of the 20th century. The illness became known as Panama disease, although it did not stay inside Panama. Its cause was a soil-borne fungus historically classified within Fusarium oxysporum forma specialis cubense. The name is complicated. What it does is straightforward. The fungus enters a susceptible banana plant through the roots. It colonizes the xylem, the internal tissue that carries water upward. Fungal growth and the plant's own defensive responses obstruct those vessels. The leaves yellow and wilt. The plant can no longer move water effectively, and eventually, it collapses. This is not a surface infection that can be cut away. By the time symptoms become visible above ground, the pathogen has already established itself inside the plant and the surrounding soil. Contaminated soil can move in water, on tools, machinery, and footwear, or with infected planting material. Once a field is infested, the fungus can remain there for years, That persistence broke the logic of the Gros Michel plantation. These operations contained enormous numbers of genetically similar plants. If the fungus could infect one, the next was likely to be equally welcoming. Then the next. Few resistant individuals stood in its way, and the plantations contained little genetic variation from which to recover. Companies tried to outrun the disease by abandoning contaminated land and opening new plantations. That imposed further costs on workers, communities, and landscapes, while doing nothing to eliminate the pathogen. Production moved. The biological problem remained. The strain, later called Tropical Race 1, spread through regions growing Gros Michel. Across the first half of the 20th century, maintaining the variety became increasingly expensive, and its place in the export trade eventually became untenable. By the middle decades of the century, the banana industry faced an extraordinary possibility. The fruit consumers knew as the standard banana might no longer be commercially producible within the system built for it. A replacement was already available. During the 19th century, banana plants belonging to the Cavendish group were cultivated in Britain at Chatsworth House, the estate associated with William Cavendish, the 6th Duke of Devonshire. Joseph Paxton, the estate's gardener, helped tend and propagate the plants. That history explains the Cavendish name, but it was not the moment when someone invented the modern export banana. Cavendish cultivars had broader Asian ancestry, and their 19th-century cultivation in Britain came many decades before their adoption on a commercial scale. Their decisive advantage was resistance to tropical race 1. Cavendish was not immune to every form of Panama disease. It simply did not succumb in the same way to the particular race destroying Gros Michel. That difference would matter enormously later. At the time, it was enough. The transition was neither immediate nor the product of one heroic decision. Standard fruit began moving toward Cavendish production, and United Fruit followed as the Gros Michel crisis worsened. Companies, plantations, and markets changed at different times. Cavendish also refers to a group of closely related cultivars. Not one single plant carried untouched through history. Cavendish brought commercial difficulties of its own. Its bunches and fruit did not tolerate the older handling system in exactly the same way as Gros Michel. So the industry changed its packaging, transportation, and handling. Cardboard boxes increasingly replaced older methods of shipping whole bunches, helping protect individual clusters of fruit. The logistics bent around the replacement. By the 1960s, Cavendish bananas had assumed the place Gros Michel once occupied in much of the international trade. Supermarket continuity was restored. To consumers, the banana was still yellow, curved, sweet, and inexpensive. Behind that familiar appearance, the industry had swapped out the biological foundation of its product. This was the rescue at the center of the banana's modern history. Cavendish did not clean the contaminated soil or eradicate Panama disease. It allowed corporations to rebuild a similar commercial system around a different plant that tropical race 1 could not effectively destroy. The shelves stayed full. Much of the architecture stayed in place. Again, vast areas were planted with clonally propagated bananas chosen for consistent export performance. Growers multiplied plants through suckers and, later, tissue culture techniques that could produce large amounts of clean planting material. The fruit met tightly standardized expectations for shape, size, handling, ripening, and flavor. The trade escaped one fungal race by changing its preferred host. It did not escape the danger of depending so heavily on one narrow genetic group. During the late 20th century, a more threatening lineage of the pathogen emerged in Taiwan. It became known as Tropical Race 4. Unlike Tropical Race 1, this lineage can infect Cavendish bananas. It threatens several other cultivated varieties as well. Tropical Race 4 spread from affected areas in Asia into other regions. Authorities confirmed it in parts of the Middle East and Africa. Then, in 2019, it was detected in Colombia, the first confirmed appearance in Latin America's major banana-producing zone.
Peru confirmed an outbreak in 2021. Those discoveries did not mean that every plantation in the Americas was infected. They did end the comfortable belief that geography would permanently separate the export heartland from the disease. The fungus usually travels through contaminated soil, water, equipment, footwear, and planting material. The banana purchased at a grocery store is not considered the route by which shoppers spread the plantation disease. The danger lies in production landscapes and movement between them, not in eating the fruit. Quarantines and farm biosecurity can slow its spread. Workers may clean their footwear and equipment. Farms may limit access, monitor plants, manage drainage, and restrict movement out of infected areas. Clean tissue culture plants can reduce the danger of distributing infected planting material. Each measure matters because delaying the pathogen's arrival protects farms and buys time. Containment, however, is difficult. Soil clings to tires. Water crosses boundaries. Symptoms may appear only after the pathogen has already had opportunities to move. Once a field is contaminated, no simple treatment restores it to normal Cavendish production. The fungus persists, so every breach matters. At first, this sounds like a story about bananas becoming extinct. It is not. Bananas are a diverse group of plants, and farmers grow hundreds of varieties. Some are sweet dessert fruits, others are staple cooking crops. They differ in color, size, texture, flavor, genome, and resistance. Local and regional banana traditions are much larger than the Cavendish export trade, and varieties do not all respond to tropical race 4 in the same way. The immediate danger is to susceptible cultivars, the livelihoods tied to them, and an international system built around Cavendish consistency. The loss of that system would not mean that the final banana had vanished. It could mean severe production losses, expensive containment, disrupted exports, abandoned land, and another forced search for a commercially viable replacement. That distinction makes the threat more precise, not less serious. A diverse species complex can survive while its economically dominant form becomes extraordinarily difficult to grow. Biological survival and supermarket continuity are two different questions. So why not replace Cavendish with one of the many other bananas farmers already cultivate? Because the export trade purchases more than sweetness. It requires a whole package of traits. A replacement must provide useful yields, resist important diseases, tolerate handling, survive transportation, ripen predictably, fit existing packing systems, satisfy market expectations, and grow in commercial environments. A banana may taste excellent and still fail somewhere between the plantation and the supermarket. Researchers are following several paths. Breeders study resistant wild Musa relatives and cultivated varieties for useful genetics. Germplasm collections preserve material that could otherwise disappear. Tissue culture can multiply selected plants under controlled conditions. Genomic tools allow researchers to identify traits and relationships with greater precision. Gene editing and genetic modification may introduce or activate resistance while preserving many Cavendish characteristics. Banana sterility makes conventional breeding difficult. The reproductive changes that remove the hard seeds also make many cultivated bananas hard to cross. Breeding can be slow and technically demanding, and it may alter commercial traits along with resistance. A resistant plant must also work beyond the laboratory. It has to withstand years of field exposure, different soils and climates, regulation, propagation, shipping, and market tests. No candidate can be treated as the inevitable successor before those tests are finished. A plant may resist one strain while remaining vulnerable to another disease. A genetically engineered line may work well biologically, but encounter regulatory or commercial barriers. A conventionally bred variety may be more resilient, but differ in flavor, appearance, or shipping behavior. And if the industry replaces Cavendish with one more uniform cultivar, it may reproduce the same structural weakness under a different name. Tropical race 4 therefore raises a larger question. Should the industry find one more resistant banana and copy it everywhere, or build a system that relies less completely on a single genetic answer? History offers no easy instruction. More diverse production can improve resilience, but it also complicates logistics and markets built for standardization. Uniform crops can be efficient, predictable, and affordable. Those benefits are real. They made bananas widely available and supported incomes throughout producing regions. But the efficiency comes with a condition. Once a specialized pathogen matches the dominant plant, sameness can turn a local infection into a systemic threat. The banana's vulnerability did not appear as an accidental flaw after its success. They developed together. Return to the wild fruit. Its large, functional seeds made it inconvenient to eat, but they also enabled sexual reproduction, continually reshuffling genes. Early farmers preserved rare plants that grew fleshy fruit without those seeds. Since the useful plants were often sterile, people reproduced them through suckers. Cloning kept the desirable fruit alive, and farmers copied many different bananas. Communities adapted them to local landscapes, meals, and conditions. Human movement carried that diversity across the tropics. Long-distance shipping later rewarded a much narrower group of traits. Merchants needed fruit that could be harvested green, handled in bulk, transported on schedule, and ripened for buyers far away. Corporate plantations made the process repeatable. Gros Michel became the preferred export solution. Growers copied it. Railways moved it. Ships delivered it. Advertisers made it ordinary. Tropical Race 1 revealed the cost. A pathogen capable of infecting Gros Michel found plantation after plantation filled with suitable hosts. The industry relocated, cleared new land, and finally adopted Cavendish. That switch rescued the export trade, but it placed another narrow genetic foundation beneath the same appetite for consistency. Cavendish was propagated, boxed, shipped, ripened, and normalized on an enormous scale. Tropical Race 4 is now exploiting that renewed uniformity. The important distinction, then, is not between natural bananas and cloned ones. Every familiar cultivated seedless banana comes from deep human intervention. The real distinction is between copying many useful cultivars and making a global system depend on one closely related group. Uniformity did not create every banana staple tradition. Bananas nourished communities long before Boston Fruit, United Fruit, refrigerated transportation, or cardboard boxes. It did help make the 20th century export trade scalable. Growers received predictable plants, shippers predictable cargo, retailers predictable ripening, and shoppers predictable fruit. Cheap, familiar, nearly interchangeable. In one specific commercial sense, the banana was saved. Cavendish replaced Gros Michel before Panama disease could permanently dismantle the international market built around a standard dessert banana. What might now be lost is not every banana on Earth. It is the familiar Cavendish system, together with the production and livelihoods tied to a cultivar that may demand another expensive and disruptive replacement. The outcome remains unsettled. Tropical Race 4 may spread unevenly. Containment may protect some regions for long periods. Resistant plants may work. Breeding and genomic technology may expand the available choices. Producers may diversify where markets and growing conditions permit. None of those outcomes is guaranteed. None of them erases the history that produced the problem. Cut a supermarket Cavendish lengthwise, and you can see the whole story in its flesh. Tiny, dark specks run down the center.
They are traces of ovules, not the large, mature seeds packed through its wild ancestors. Their absence gives the fruit its soft, edible interior. It also means the plant has to be copied. That seedless flesh carries the decisions of farmers who noticed unusual plants and kept their suckers alive. The uniform shape carries the demands of packing, shipping, ripening, and retail. The familiar flavor carries the 20th century replacement of Gros Michel with Cavendish. And the plant's genetic similarity to countless others carries the danger posed by Tropical Race 4.
An ordinary banana is not a wild object that people happened to discover, ship, and place on a shelf. People selected it, preserved it, moved it, standardized it, rescued it, then exposed it again through the same consistency that made the rescue commercially successful. The soft flesh and missing seeds represent one of agriculture's oldest achievements. The repeated curve and predictable yellow peel represent a much newer industrial one. Together, they produced a fruit that travels farther than its early cultivators could have imagined, yet depends more completely than ever on human protection. That is the modern banana's paradox. Farmers kept a nearly seedless fruit alive by copying it. Corporations built an export empire by narrowing the copies that mattered. Disease destroyed the first dominant version, and resistance gave the trade another. Now the same strategy is facing the same kind of test. The next time you peel a Cavendish, the evidence will be there in your hand. Edible, because its seeds disappeared. Dependable, because people reproduced it so faithfully. And vulnerable, because those faithful copies became a global system. If this history changed the way you see an everyday banana, subscribe to The Hidden Course and share which part of the story surprised you most.